Welcome to Off the Shelf, Glenview TV programming. My name is Yvonne Wolf, and today we have our special guest, Janie Baskin, an author, illustrator, and artist. She's a 13-year Glenview resident, and Janie, welcome to our program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about how do you split yourself into three as an artist, illustrator, and author?
It was a challenge to try and figure out how to do that. I've been trained as an artist, and I've always done artwork. So my days, my work hours were all art. And when I decided to write, I had to come up with another way. And I tried 3 days working as one, 3 days working as something else, with a day off. And I just tried a lot of different experiments, and it ended up to be 6 months art, 6 months writing.
Can you tell us a little distinction between these three terms? Because many times people think of, well, artist is also an illustrator, aren't they?
Yes. To me, artists are anyone who creates something. And it can be with paint, it could be with words, it could be with cake batter. My distinction for myself is I'm trained as a fine and graphic artist, so I work as a professional artist. As an illustrator, I'm also trained as a children's book illustrator. I make pictures for children's books, which is very different because that's for a professional market as opposed to a market that would serve something that I just wanted to do for myself and that I wanted to put out into the world. And writing, of course, is writing, also, though, a creative endeavor.
So how did you start? Did you come from a family of writers?
My family appreciates the arts very much. My mother was not an artist herself, but really enjoyed the arts. My father is a painter, my grandmother was a painter, and my sisters are a very fine writer, as well as my brother, although no one wrote professionally. We were given every opportunity to do artwork that one could have in their lives. And it sort of evolved. We went to very fine schools and we learned how to write, and I loved writing. I loved writing from when I was a little girl.
Now, you mentioned earlier when we had a chance to meet each other that a good reader makes a good writer. Well, is that true for you, or how?
I think it is true. A good reader makes a good writer, and I think I am an exception. When I was a child, I loved to read comic books. I was not a big reader. My sister was a huge reader, and we would play library, and I would be the person who always went into the library, her bedroom, and asked for the book that was never on the shelf, knowing it wasn't going to be on the shelf because I didn't want to read it. So it is rather surprising, but I think it's a misnomer that you have to be a good reader to be a good writer. I think anyone can be a good writer if that's what they truly want to be.
So I know you have this, your book is called Paint Me a Monster. Can you tell me how it came about? And when did how long did it take you to plan the writing?
I didn't exactly plan the writing. After I had illustrated my first book that was published, I thought, what's next? And I thought, well, I will learn how to write, and then I can write the book and I can illustrate the book. I never intended to write a novel. I studied mostly writing picture books and early chapter books. At the very end of my 2 years getting a master's degree at Vermont College, I decided that if I didn't learn to write a novel then, I would never learn how with such fine expertise of the teachers that were at the college. So I decided I would undertake it. And my advisor told me to write what I know. So I just started writing about things that I knew. Playing with my sisters and brothers, growing up, going to school. My mother died when I was in my 30s, and I wrote about that because I went to school 12 years ago. I went back to school, and I just started writing. And from there, from that writing, the novel evolved, and totally unintentionally.
Well, maybe that's probably the best way, because many times people find writing a novel is a daunting task, right? So you didn't plan on writing a novel. Were you working on a short story? Did you had a number of pages in mind? How did it?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I didn't want to write a novel because it was too daunting. I didn't think I had enough words to fill 200 or 300 pages. I like picture books. 32 pages, every word counts because it's such a short book. But the novel started out in a series of sketches, writing, as I said, what I know. And my advisor said, dig deep, get messy, and write. And I did. And I went home. After I graduated, I put it in a drawer and left it there for about 5 years. And I came back, I was cleaning out the drawer and I was reading it and thought, this is pretty good. I kind of like it. But I put it back in the drawer because it was also somewhat revealing personally, and I was afraid of publishing it, if it would get published. So I put it back in the drawer, and about 3 years later I came back to it and I kept thinking, this is really good. I'd like to see if there's a possibility in it going anywhere. So I gave myself 6 months to finish writing it, which I did, and I sent it off to an advisor for critique, and that's when the novel started really happening.
And you said something about you didn't mean for it to be published?
No. The more I wrote,
Yeah.
the deeper I dug and the messier I got, I kept thinking, do I really want people to read this? But the novel is not autobiographical. This is a work of fiction. It's based in reality, but it's been fictionalized to make a good story. Story has to have setting, plot, characters, a problem, a resolution. And to have it be a good story, I heightened everything. I made it much more than what it was. And so, but people don't always realize that. And sometimes they personalize things if they think it's them.
Yes.
And that's what I was afraid of.
Yes.
So I left it in the drawer for a long time.
So tell me, how did you send it off? Tell us the process of
Okay.
pitching in this novel when you were done.
Okay. After I sent it in for critique and I got it back from my advisor, she said she loved the book. She loved the character, but she felt cheated because I had not totally written the ending. I had alluded to the ending, but not written it, and she wanted to know about this girl's journey. It's a story of a young girl. And I purposely did not want to write that part of the journey. It was going to be long, it was going to be hard, it was going to put me in a very vulnerable position emotionally, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to do that. So I purposely didn't write it. But she said if I wanted this novel to really be a novel, I needed to do it. She needed 30 to 60 more pages. So I went home, well, I was home, and I wrote 150 more pages, and I just sent it off to an editor.
Yeah.
That's a story in itself, too. But I sent it off, and that's how that evolved.
I just find it funny that when you're beginning, you're used to the succinct quality of 32 pages, and now somebody just asked you to put in 60 more, and you gave them 100.
I know, it's contagious.
Oh,
It's like once you start, or once I started and I got this idea, it kept growing and growing and growing, and you can feel as a writer that there's a seed there, and it has to come up through the ground, and it gets a leaf, and then it needs another leaf, and then another leaf, and then it has these petals. But 4 petals isn't enough, 6 petals isn't enough. It's got to be this tremendous rose or hyacinthia or some flower with lots and lots and lots of petals, and it just keeps growing. And that's what editing is about. So it is kind of strange that I wanted 32 pages and it ended up to be over 300.
So did you expect them to publish your book? I mean, once you...
No, I was doing my due diligence. I was looking for publishing companies that would be looking for a book like what I wrote. And I happened to come across a notice in one of the publications that I read about writing that a company called Enslow Publishing was starting a new imprint for young adult books, which my book is a young adult book. So I called them to find out what they wanted. And when I was on the phone, the woman who answered said, just a moment. And she put this other person on the phone who said, hello, please tell me what your book is about. I'm the executive editor. And I was overjoyed. Nobody talks to the executive editor. So I told her what the book was about. She said, I think we would be very interested in this book. Why don't you send it? So I said, okay, I'll send it. And I did, and 2 weeks later, I got a letter that said, we are very interested in publishing your book. If it's still available, please let us know.
And that's where we got your book. I mean, that's the beginning.
Right, and it wasn't called Paint Me a Monster at the time.
What was the original title?
It was called Rinny Like the Dog, which was just a working title. It refers a lot to the dog Rin Tin Tin, the bravest, fastest, strongest dog in the world.
Was it difficult for you to change that title, or does the editor?
It was hard to change a title. I knew the title needed to be changed, But deciding on a final title was hard. And the editors and I went back and forth about the titles, and one of them came up with Paint Me a Monster, and they really liked it. I wasn't sure what it meant. Paint me a monster or paint me a monster? And I thought about it and thought about it. The editor loved it, so he knew more about it than I did, and I agreed.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good choice.
And you, from your experience, you also told us that, you told me that editor plays a big role between artist and illustrator collaboration, right? I read picture books for my children a lot, and I wonder sometimes that how did this story unfold, because I feel the pictures tell as much as the story, as the words. And I wonder, how does that work? And how does that come together? Can you tell us about that process?
I can tell you about my process. First of all, there's an editor for writing, there's an editor for illustrations, and they're separate.
Okay.
So once a book gets accepted as a story, then it goes to the illustration department. The editor picks out an author that he thinks is appropriate, an illustrator that he thinks is appropriate to illustrate the book in the style that's the vision of the publishing company. The editor and the two editors talk, but the artist and the writer rarely get together. They don't know each other. A lot of times authors have their books come out and the illustrations aren't at all what they like. Sometimes they're overjoyed with what they are. It's sort of a roll of the dice.
So, and then the illustrator submits into what they think the story should look like. Like, for example, Uncle's Bakery that you illustrated, it was so delicious. I wonder, how did you work, how did you work with that? Yeah.
Okay. I had submitted some illustrations to this company that does books for the academic market, and it was a lot about food, and I love painting foods, and I love painting bright colors, so children's book was perfect. So I submitted illustrations to them. They liked the illustrations. They have files of illustrations that they sift through, thousands of illustrations, and they liked what I did, so they contacted me, wrote a letter, asked me if I would do this for work for hire, which is different than work where you get a residual.
Okay.
And a lot of times in the academic market, it's work for hire. And we agreed, we wrote the contract, and that was that.
You mentioned that there were some restrictions, like no words
Right.
in your picture. What does that mean?
Because this was a book for the academic market, this was a book for certain grade levels, so only certain vocabulary words could be used. And in one of my illustrations it was the picture of the front door of the bakery with the little girl going in. And I wrote, welcome. I wanted it to feel fresh and friendly and warm. And I got a letter back from the editor that said, please take the word welcome out. It's not in our vocabulary list. I was very surprised.
I am too.
Yeah. So I had to be very careful about anything on a shirt that might be an insignia or a welcome mat or pictures on the walls that I had painted, that there were no words on anything that wasn't in the vocabulary list.
See, that's something I didn't know that the illustrator would have to know. Do you have any advice as a writer for us?
Sure. I think the advice that I would give is the advice that I was given. First, write what you know. You don't have, and write what you know, go deep, get messy. And it's kind of hard to do that at first. So you just start writing, you start journaling. And I read a book called The Artist's Way, which many, many artists are familiar with, by Julia Cameron. And every day you do something called morning pages. You write for however long it takes to write 3 pages. And even if you have nothing to write, and you write, I have nothing to write, I have nothing to write. The weather's nice. I'm going to go back to bed. I have nothing to write. You do it for 3 pages. And eventually it evolves. And I think that that's a really great place to start. I think worrying about what to write is a mistake. I think just writing, even if it's your grocery list, is a good place to go. So you write what you know, and
Get messy.
you get messy.
Yes, what do you mean? Like do you dig deep inside you, or you talk about things that's uncomfortable for you? I mean, what do you mean by get messy?
Well, when I was at Vermont, and my advisor said, get messy, and don't be afraid to go where it's dark. She meant go to the places where it hurts. And that's a hard thing to do.
I think so too.
And it's really hard because nobody wants to be vulnerable. Nobody wants to be rejected. Nobody wants to be thought of as less than. And we all fear, I believe, that if we reveal ourselves in that way or show any signs of weakness, it's a point where people can say, I don't know if I want to go there with this person. So that's hard, but that's where the real writing is. That's where authenticity is, and that's what makes good writing. And you can't be authentic without being vulnerable. And so I would say, do those things, write what you know, get messy, and keep writing and reach. And one of the most important things that I would add is to stop the self-editing. I'm sure people, this is so common. People go, I can't write that, or this doesn't sound good, and they scratch it out. I'm going to rewrite it this way. It's the worst thing you can do.
That stops the writing process.
Instant paralysis. You just keep writing. You turn that voice off, as you do in anything that you want to do well. And you just keep going and keep going. And a lot of writers say that the next day they'll read what they wrote and then they'll go over and correct it. And I like to do that too, but I find that not helpful, because you get stuck correcting and editing, and all it does is procrastinate the writing process. Really, you need to just write unedited. I know that after I write something, there's going to be a lot of time to go back and rewrite it. What's important is to get it down the first time, and not just the messy side of life, but the messy writing. Let it be messy.
Use this paper. Use as many paper as you need.
Exactly.
Right?
Just like if I was going to make a sketch of a horse and I kind of messed up the face, I'm not going to erase it and draw the line again and then erase it and draw it again until it's perfect. I'm just going to do it, put in the body. Then I'll go back and do it again, do it again.
Now, you from an illustrator's background, do you find that sometimes writing a scene, or drawing a scene of your book is easier than writing the scene? You understand what I mean?
It's really interesting because as a writer, I'm less of a perfectionist and looser. So drawing is harder. But when I write, I'm actually seeing everything. Everything is a movie. Everything is a picture in my head. For example, if you said, Janie, what is Paint Me a Monster about? My answer would be, it's about a girl sloshing through a torrential storm that she lives with every day in her home. That's a picture. The book opens when she's 3 years old. It ends when she's 16 years old. And in that period of time, her parents divorce. Her mother is emotionally unstable. Her father is emotionally distant. She has a lot of troubles to contend with, and she's going through puberty, which is already hard. She has step-siblings. She develops an eating disorder. And I should give her a name, Rinnie. Rinnie Gardner is her name. And this is a lot to contend with, and there are a lot of people who have a lot to contend with on their plate. And I think that this story is a story of hope, self-empowerment, and resiliency. And what I hope people walk away with is knowing that nothing has to be done alone. There's always someone there. If you can find a way to call out, any way to call out, without hurting yourself, there's help. And there's hope. And I think wherever there's hope, there can be a happy ending.
What is your happy ending in your life as an artist?
As an artist? Well, my happy ending is that I've had so many happy beginnings. I'm always on the road to the next most wonderful thing. I've had books, I've had gallery shows, I've had things I've illustrated, in books. My happy ending is that it just keeps going. I'm very, very excited. I love waking up every day.
Yeah, you seem a very energetic person too. So I find that you feel that you get more energy from working with people.
Yeah, I love giving back. I feel like I have a lot of blessings, and that my job here is to give back as much as I can. And part of the giving back is, for me, learning how to do it. Learning the best ways.
And sometimes people say an artist or a writer's life is kind of lonely because you do most of your work.
It's true.
In your studio, at home.
Yep.
Not out with people, but you do enjoy that part of it too.
You have to make a real effort to get out and be with people. But I'm involved with a lot of things, personal things, and you have to if you want to survive and be happy, I think.
You mentioned that, from when we just met, that you teach expressive and healing art. Tell me what that means.
Okay. About 18 years ago, I started working with adults who have cancer. And I started a class called Expressive and Healing Art, which was it was a time for them to come in, throw off all the cares of the day, sit down, free their minds, and get to this point of freedom and relaxation through doing artwork. Open-ended artwork with the only expectation of producing something that feels good to you, or maybe not feels good to you, but that you enjoy doing because you're making something of your own. And there are lots of studies that have been done that show that doing this, being in this creative art process, has a lot of beneficial health effects. It lowers blood pressure, the ability to pick up serotonin in the brain is increased. There's a lot of special things that happen.
Oh, definitely.
So that's the healing part.
So this is just for adults, or?
That was for adults, and it evolved about 6 years ago. I started teaching kids at One Step at a Time camp, which is a camp for kids with cancer. And I've been working with kids who have cancer and adults and adults in compromised situations, not just with cancer, but other illnesses or just in a place of life where they're having a problem.
What sort of art? I mean,
it's all kinds of things.
Or any...
It's mixed media. Sometimes it's watercolors or drawing, pen and ink. It can be working with clay, collage, a lot of collage, sculpture, all different kinds of things. The point is not so much what we're working with, but getting to this point that I call the my light zone, which is at the opposite extreme of the twilight zone. Nobody wants to go to the twilight zone. It's scary and uncomfortable. You're on edge. But in the my light zone, you're at peace. Everything around you disappears. It kind of evaporates, and you're just there with you. Your mind opens up. There's new clarity, ability to process problems. It becomes easier. And so that's what I like to do, and that's what I teach in expressive art.
Wow, sounds very interesting, because I've seen organizations like nonprofits that arrange flowers and with psychotherapy as psychotherapy, and patients who through flower arrangements are recovering, and I think this is similar to that. Right?
It's very similar. It's about putting your mind, your body, your emotions in a place of healing, where stress is relieved, so you can feel good about yourself. You produce, it's not about the product you produce, but it's about producing something and feeling good about yourself, being empowered, self-empowered. So it's exactly like that.
Wow. Wow, I'm so glad to hear about all the ways you can express art and be an artist. It seems that writing, and digital art and painting, it's all art, isn't it?
I think everything is art, but for me the most...
Icing? Okay.
Yeah, icing on the cake. I used to sell desserts and hors d'oeuvres. To me, it's all about creating. But the most fun is sharing it and watching other people be able to do it. I love working with people who say, I can't draw a straight line. And I go, you're in the perfect place. Because if you think you can draw a straight line, that might be the only thing you draw. We want to expand on that. We want to have fun. So it's just so much fun being able, it's such a privilege to be able to work with other people. It's great.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us on Off the Shelf. Our special guest, Janie Baskin, she just shared with us some wonderful expression of art and what an artist's life she leads. Janie Baskin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I do, but maybe other people will have the opportunity to do it too, which would be wonderful.
Well, thank you for joining us on Off the Shelf. My name is Yvonne Wolf. I hope you join us next time.